A very good morning to all of you. We have been talking about Marxism and Marxist literary criticism. In yesterday's lecture, we came to know something about Marxism, its ideology, and then we went on talking about Marxist criticism, in which we were dealing with the role of the Marxist critic. I told you people that a Marxist critic is a careful reader, a viewer, who keeps in mind issues of power and money. When you read a piece of literature, any artistic work, any literary work, any poem, any novel, any short story, then time you have the issues of power and money at the back of your mind as a Marxist critic. And this critic has falling of the questions in his or her mind. Yesterday, I read out these questions. Let's repeat it quickly and then we shall go ahead. What role does class play in the work? Here, class stands for social class, upper class, middle class, middle class, etc., or lower class. What is the author's analysis of class relations? While reading the story, you, as a critic, look at the author's analysis of class relations. So these are the questions that you always have in your mind as a Marxist critic. How do characters overcome oppression? If at all there is any situation of oppression or exploitation. Oppression means being torturing or exploiting someone in the name of class, in the name of caste, okay, in the name of some other factors. How this operation takes place and how the characters overcome this operation. In what ways does the work serve as propaganda for the status quo? Means whether this work is a kind of propaganda. Propaganda means defending something. The status quo means the situation is defended. Or does it try to undermine it? Or does it try to talk about its drawbacks? What does the what does the work say about oppression? Or are social conflicts ignored or blamed elsewhere? Now you can analyze the book The Merchant of Venice from this perspective, or Shakespeare's many of the plays can be understood from this perspective. Does the work propose some form of utopian vision? Utopian means an ideal, something which is not reality, something which is imaginary. Means suppose you see a dream wherein you have an ideal land where people are living peacefully without any kind of conflicts in the name of caste, in the name of class, in the name of religion. No such kind of situation scenario is there. If you remember your fiction, an allegory written by George Orwell, Animal Farm, you will understand what I'm trying to refer here. The animals rebel against the man, the owner of the farm. And what happens later? Means this rebellion is a kind of Marxism, a communism. And what happens later is a criticism on communism by George Orwell. So it was a criticism on Russian communism. So whether the work proposes some form of utopian vision as a solution to the problems encountered in the work. Many of the Hindi movies of 70s, 80s come up with this utopian vision. You must have seen movies by Rajesh Khanna, Amitabh Bachchan of that period. You will realize that there is a kind of utopian vision. The hero, which generally an angry young man, rebels against the existing social norms, and there is a kind of conflict between the poor and the rich, the class conflict in the form of love, okay, in the form of marriage, etc., and opposition by the father of the girl's father, I mean to say, and the hero goes against it. So, I mean, many of the Hindi movies you come across this. So you have to just see if the work comes up with some kind of solution. Now let's go ahead with the next aspect of a discussion. Here we shall understand what Marxist literary theory is. We have already understood about Marx and his communism. So Marxist literary theory is based on the philosophy and principles of Karl Marx and his associate Friedrich Engels. Marx and Engels, they are called together. Both were German. So Marx and Engels introduced communism in their jointly written work, Communist Manifesto of 1848. And what was the objective of this manifesto, or Marxism, which is referred to as Marxism? The objective of Marxism is to bring about a classless society where everyone is equal. There is no class, no upper class, no middle class, no lower class. They have this objective of bringing a classless society based on the common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. So whatever is in Russia and China is the reflection of Marxism. There is no individual owner of production, means industry, manufacturing units, farms, etc. And whatever is earned, produced, that is distributed and exchanged. So this is having common ownership. The Marxism is a materialist philosophy, the philosophy which centers around materialism, what we call in Marathi as Bhautikvad. It does not believe in spiritualism as such, because it explains things without assuming the existence of worlds or forces beyond the natural world. They don't believe, or they don't think about God and other aspects, philosophy of that kind. For them, there is nothing beyond the natural world around us. There is nothing beyond the society that we live in. Everything is here only. Means they don't talk about metaphysical things or spiritual things. So this philosophy is a materialist philosophy. भौतिकवाद आहे. For Marxist, history is class struggle. As we saw it yesterday. For them, history is no class struggle, a struggle between different classes. And progress comes through the struggle for power between different social classes. This is the theory that is applied to literary criticism. So they believed that literature can only be understood by viewing it in the context of history and society. They directly correlated literature to history and society. They believed that literature can be understood by looking at the context of history and society. Both history and society are and have been dominated by class struggle, by the ownership of the means of production. Now, what if you go through the history of India, history of other countries? It was the history of class struggle between the haves and have-nots. Ahere nahere यांच्यातील संघर्ष. That's what they believe. Okay, they understand everything in terms of materialism. What is their ideology? An ideology is a set of beliefs. In every age, mankind works to an ideology. An ideology can be understood as a superstructure of ideas. It is a structure. They erect themselves to explain how the society works. Ideology is a kind of superstructure of ideas. It is constructed to explain how the society works. So, Marxist ideology or the German ideology defines ideology as the sets of beliefs, concepts, and ways of thinking. Ideology can be understood as ideas and values that shape our thoughts. Okay, means ideology, the set of beliefs, concepts, and ways of thinking, ideas and values that shape our thoughts. The way our thoughts come out, they are shaped by certain beliefs, concepts, thinking, ideas, values, etc., and is used to explain and understand the world. We pursue world through this ideology. We understand the world through this ideology. Therefore, there is differences of opinion. In a very compact manner, precise manner, we can understand that in the Marxian sense, it is a system of beliefs or ideas. Ideology is a system of beliefs or ideas of an economic and political system. And just like that German manifesto, they had published the Communist Manifesto in 1948, sorry, 1848. They published both Marx and Engels, the German ideology in 1846. This German ideology, the central thesis or central statement of which latter literary theory is idea that culture is materially produced. It became a central thesis for literary theory, which believes that the idea believes in the idea that culture is materially produced. Culture is no not something ideal. It comes out of material development. The work, means literary work, constituted. I'm sorry. I'm talking about here the German ideology. It constituted a preliminary statement of their later and more developed theory of historical materialism. What is that? That consciousness and its products are determined by material conditions. Whatever thinking, whatever ideology we have, it is a kind of base. Means it has a base in our material conditions, economic situation, we can say, in other words. So this is the ideology in which they talked about superstructure and base. Now let's try to understand these two terms. They are very crucial in understanding literary theory, Marxist literary theory. So this ideology, specifies that superstructure is the outcome of the base. Superstructure means the ideology of any kind, your beliefs about culture, your beliefs about values, etc. So ideology that is dominant in any era is the product of its economic structure. That is the base. Once again, I would like to tell you that ideology stands for superstructure. Suppose now let's take the example of a building. Now you see a building is a superstructure, but it is built on the base. And what is that base? As we talk about foundation, here its foundation is economic structure. And the class relation and class interest are the result. It's whatever class we talk about. We talk about upper class, middle class, lower class, etc., and the relations between these classes or the interest of these classes are having the base of economic structure. So he uses this architectural metaphor. Just now I told you, base and superstructure. Marx represented ideology as superstructure. This is a metaphor, architectural metaphor. You need to understand. He uses it from architecture. Superstructure means ideology is a kind of superstructure of which the contemporary socio-economic system is the base. Whatever thinking we have, whatever political or cultural behavior that we show is the superstructure, but it has its base in the socio-economic system. So in the present age, the dominant ideology is that of the property owning class, which is called the bourgeois class, a bourgeois class. The bourgeois class is the property owning class, the capitalist class, we can say. They are having the capital, they are having the control of the wealth. So a strict Marxist critic treats all literary works. Now we need to bring this ideology in the context of literature. A Marxist critic treats all literary works of art as being dominated by the bourgeois mentality. And a Marxist literary critic demands a literature that will present social realism. Okay, they insist on the literature that represent social realism. Now let's try to understand some of the contributors to Marxist criticism briefly. These are certain thinkers. I'm not going to talk about them in detail, but briefly we shall understand. The first Marxist critic is George Lukács. He was the Hungarian thinker. George Lukács was the Hungarian thinker and the most widely influential of Marxist critics, who represent a flexible view of the role of ideology. And it was Lukács who inaugurated a distinctively Hegelian. Hegel was the German philosopher. He presented Hegelian style of Marxist thought. And he treated literary works as reflections of an unfolding system, that is society. Another prominent contributor is Bertolt Brecht, who he rejected the kind of formal unity admired by Lukács and opposed the social realism. His well-known theoretical device, actually he uses the German term, the English translation is the alienation effect. And the German term is Werfraum effect. That is a bit difficult to pronounce here. I'm not going for the German term. So he uses that German term, and the English translation is alienation effect. Okay, I shall show you that the German term so that you understand what I'm trying to say here. So Brecht was the German dramatist and Marxist critic, and he uses the term, I can show it to you now, Verfremdung effect. Okay, that you should know it because the questions are asked on this particular term in your certain net examination. They may ask you what is the German term for alienation effect. So then time you should be familiar with this, or what is the meaning of the term Verfremdung effect. So then time you should know it. So he came up with this theoretical device, the Wolfram Dream effect or the alienation effect. Or this can be equated to the Russian formalist term, defamiliarization. You are familiar with this as well. And he named his theory of realism as anti-Aristotelian. He is also well known for his epic theatre, which signified primarily his attempt to emulate on the stage the objectivity of epic narrative. I'm not going into details of things. Here are some more critics who contributed to Marxist theory. The Frankfurt School of Marxist critique rejected realism altogether. Yes, there is an opposition as well. So you can go through this list. I'm not going in detail because of lack of time. But I don't think that I should talk about these things in detail here. Well, this is how we become familiar with Marxist literary theory with reference to its ideology.